to Leveraging the Laboratory, a Mayo Clinic Laboratories podcast for administrators, outreach managers, and laboratory professionals to learn how to best leverage and optimize the laboratory for patients, clients, and staff. I'm Jane Hermansen, outreach manager at Mayo Clinic Laboratories. Joining me today are my two favorite guests, Dijkman Dulkes and Brianne Newton, who are outreach solutions strategists within Mayo Clinic Laboratories. Our discussion topic today is going to be surveys. We know that getting customer feedback is so important, and it is of tremendous value to any outreach program. So Brianne, Ellen, by show of hands and an audible yes or no, who loves getting surveys?
Not me, Jane. Not me. Nope. Nope.
Okay, nope, no. How do you really feel? I'm not quite sure. Well, okay, you don't love getting surveys. Do you fill out the survey requests that you get? Are you compliant, or are you one of them?
Depends. It depends on my mood.
Okay, tell me more.
Did I have a happy or not happy experience?
Okay. So it kind of, there's a lot of depends in there, and maybe we can kind of use our time today to talk about that, because we know getting a survey data is really important. And given your personal experience and just kind of your wishy-washiness, we know it's really hard to get. And are you getting full, complete data, or are you only hearing from the happy customers, hearing from the unhappy customers? What are you getting? So let's start by talking about who the customers are that we may want to know information about. So when you think about an outreach program, clearly a lot of people interact with us, but whose opinions on the outside matter the most to an outreach program? Ellen, let's start with you. What do you think?
I want to hear from everybody, but it seems like we only usually hear from everybody when something goes wrong. You know, occasionally we hear when something goes right, but it's really good if you can get a pulse of the current state before it goes wrong. So I think it's good to survey those customers who send you specimens. So your outpatient providers, and if you can survey those providers that use your laboratory and those that don't. Why don't they use your laboratory? I think it's good to survey the nursing homes, maybe those that use your phlebotomy service and those that don't. And if they would use your laboratory, what would it need for them to use your laboratory? I think it's really good to survey the patient, those that come into your laboratory and those that maybe use your offsite patient service centers. And I think there's opportunity to survey as many people as you can. Whether you get data back is another story.
Okay, so clearly surveying everybody. Brianne, what are your thoughts on that topic?
One that I would throw out to consider is the customers of your customers. So the detail in that is the patients of your provider customers, because if the patients somehow in some way are having a bad experience, they will let their physicians know. So maybe the physician's happy with you, but their own patients are not. And so you may or may not be able to glean that information. And if you don't ask for it, you won't get it. And if your questions are not crafted on the physician surveys to ask those sorts of questions, you may never know. And they may just disappear. The patients just may go somewhere else and you'll never know why. So that's kind of an overlooked opportunity and wealth of information there is the customers of your customers.
Sure. Well, and I think that if the patient is unhappy, they complain to the physician. The physician may fill out the survey negatively, but it was one patient who is influencing it, and it may not be the real picture at all. Well, you all know, and I think our audience knows, that the College of American Pathologists, CAP, if you're a CAP accredited laboratory, there's even a question about surveying physicians. So we may actually say that surveys are truly a mandatory requirement for a laboratory. So if you're not doing it, you should be. And if you're in this not doing it, or maybe I'm not doing it very well, let's talk about developing surveys. So Brianne, if you think about developing a survey, if the physician is the customer, what would you want to know?
That's a good question. The first thing that leaps to mind is more operational types of functions for your outreach program. So they're going to care about what affects their patients. So I'm thinking, timeliness of the results. I'm thinking ease of order entry. If they have to sift through confusing acronyms and things to even find the test that they want, that's, that can be very off-putting. But also after the patient encounters your services or they themselves. So how about billing? How how accurate is your billing practices? Is it easy to reach someone, both for the provider with questions and concerns, but also, the patient? So I feel like a lot of times the provider inside of that survey, you can the physician is often the middleman sometimes for what affects the patient, but I see them as being very operationally driven in their own satisfaction with your services. So is courier, part of your operations, is connectivity, things like that that would really affect their ability to take care of their own patients. Definitely include questions like that.
Yep, absolutely. So really related to their direct relationship with
Yeah.
the laboratory. Okay,
Mhm.
Ellen, going to switch over to you. How about from the patient perspective? Do you think that those questions would be the same as the physician, or what would be different for the patient?
Well, I think from the patient perspective, I think it's when a patient, if we're looking at an outreach patient, they're a patient that has a choice, right? They have a requisition or they're going to have a lab test. They decide where they want to go. I mean, a lot of times their physician will direct them where to go, but ultimately they can decide where to go. Their experience starts the minute they get in the car and they're going to go. So the laboratory judges wait time by when they maybe get the requisition and they start the clock of how long the wait time is that the patient gets drawn. But for the patient, it's when they drive around the parking lot and they look for a parking space, or there's in a parking garage and they fight for that. I'm speaking for experience. My mother's a handicap person, and we drive around looking for a space, and all the handicap are taken and I drop her off. There's no concierge to help her. And I leave her in her wheelchair and I leave her while I go and look for parking space. And I hope my mother doesn't unlock the brake and she's going down the chute of the parking garage. So that's not a good experience for my mother or for me. So parking, maybe that's something you put in a survey. Their wait time. How long are they waiting? Is their name being called? Do they feel like their privacy is being violated when they're going to have their blood drawn and there's no curtain? And maybe the tests are being talked about or something by the phlebotomist. Is there discretion? Or when I'm thinking about my own mother when she goes to have a urine collected and she's handicapped and the instructions on collecting a urine aren't very clear to her. Those are kinds of things that we can, the Office of Patient Experience now is in a lot of facilities. How is that generated for the lab? Is there waiting material to read while you're in the waiting room? When you go to Disney, you don't feel like you're waiting because there's a lot of things to distract you. Child life can be involved in how to set up a waiting room so that kids are distracted. Is there those kinds of things that can help? And patients have a lot of input if you can glean what they're doing. Are the orders ready? Or are you noticing that John Smith came in after you and he's getting his labs done before you? And you sit there with anxiety because you're sitting there, you've got places to go, and you're sitting there and sitting there and sitting there because no one comes out and talks to you. It'd be great if the lab knew that. Is the staff professional? We all have a code of professional behavior, and are they following it? And then is there anything that you maybe didn't ask in a survey, but a patient wants to share it with you? And then, those are the kinds of things that I think a patient would love to tell you if they have the forum to do so.
Sure. And they're not things that a provider would even necessarily be aware of, but patients are certainly comparing their experience with us compared to other service experiences. So we need to make sure that we're accommodating. And I think a survey is a fantastic tool. Okay, well, how customers that don't have as much direct interaction with us, providers might be in our organizations with visiting their patients. Of course, we have direct interaction with the patients. How about those other clients, like a nursing home or hospital? Any extra or different questions that we might want to ask them?
Yeah, so I think the ease of using the lab comes to how easy is it for them to get supplies? How easy is it for if you don't offer a phlebotomy service and you train them on how to draw blood? How easy is it for them to use your lab? Do you provide education? Is your on-site test catalog easily accessible, and do they know how to order it? Do they know how to call your laboratory, your customer call center, to get information? Similarly, on the post analytic, are they able to get their results? And do they know when a test is canceled? Or do they sit there and sit there and sit there and wait for a result and it never comes because something happened with the test order? Criticals, our staff called with a critical result if they're not interfaced. So all those communication touch points would be items that you could include in a survey. If you're not meeting with them regularly, maybe a survey would be a nice way to get a pulse regularly.
Sure. Brianne, how about you? Anything extra to add?
No, I think Ellen did a great job. Just in taking care of those sorts of customers is going to be done with one degree of distance, unfortunately, a lot of times, because it is another entity, it's another, organization. And so what jumped to mind immediately when you were asking your question is the availability and approachability of your customer service, your call center. So Ellen covered that very well, is because so many of their questions, concerns, issues are going to be handled over the phone. More so than maybe a periodic drop by from a live person, is to make sure that they have resources that you have uploaded or provided ahead of time versus, in more of a reactive capacity. But just make sure that they have as many tools beforehand as needed. And then when something does come up, that you have the best people on the phone to talk to that make sure that they can get their questions answered as soon as possible, as quick a time as possible.
Well, I appreciate that comment about having the right person available to them. And something that I see just Mayo Clinic Laboratories, us as a reference laboratory, making sure that our doctors, our subject matter experts, are available by phone to talk to someone who has a very complex and high level question is incredibly important. And that's something that you cannot rely on an entry level individual to answer in the right fashion. So certainly to have the right people. I appreciate that comment. Okay, guys, thank you. So we've talked about the who the customers are. We've talked about what we may want to ask them. Now let's discuss the how. Since I both know how you feel about surveys, you don't like them. What's your favorite kind of survey to complete and your least favorite? And Ellen, why don't you start? Tell us what your favorite kind to complete is, and then Brianne, you too.
I really like the little happy faces. I'm a sad face or I'm a happy face on a scale of 1 to 5. That might be really good for a patient experience. How was your experience today? Happy face, sad face. Although that doesn't really glean much specific data on a specific subject. So for those kind of questions, I like on a scale of 1 to 5. How is our staff today on a scale of professionalism, 1 to 5? Rarely, all the time, sometimes. I like those kind of surveys.
Yep, same for me. I was gonna say, yep, I'm a Likert girl all the way. So smiley face, stars, thumbs, whatever, on the scale. Those I find are great for positive experiences. I don't want a fill in the blank survey for a positive experience because I don't want to have to craft phrases to shape my experience when I'm happy. Just give it to me and I can just fill it out real quick. I do like the option though of if I'm having a negative experience, if you've scored less than X, here's a space below, because usually that will include details from whatever I'm upset about that I would like for them to address. And as Ellen mentioned, they can't do that without specifics. And
Yep.
so happy experience, just 5s all the way down or whatever. But if I'm upset about something, I want the opportunity to share the specifics of why. I definitely like those more so than rank your whatever, all that kind of stuff. I love the 1 to 5s, 1 to 10s, and then whenever I want the opportunity to share a little bit more detail.
I like that. And Ellen, so you made a comment about the smiley face. How was your experience today? Smiley face, non-smiley face. Great. But how was your experience? It's what we might call a very green word or very vague, right? So we may not really know what that patient, what their perception of the word experience is. So my thought along those lines is that you might want to say, how was your wait time today? How was your phlebotomy painful? Something like that. And then you can actually start to drill down into some of the details. So I think that there is a space for all of them. I'd love to know how you each feel about just the types of surveys. So you've already talked about some of them but how do they come to you? Is it something on paper that's handed to you? Is it electronic? Brianne, what do you think about what do you see some of the
Ooh,
benefits of maybe
paper.
paper surveys? Yeah.
Ooh, paper. Um, I Ironically, I'm actually a little bit of an old soul where this is concerned. Don't tell anybody in healthcare that, but I prefer paper books. I prefer paper notes. I prefer just tactile reminders. And so for me, that if I put a paper survey somewhere, I may come back across it. And it's just kind of a prompt. In my mind, for my world, it's much easier to delete something digital and forget all about it. Um, However, in healthcare where we are moving to paperless everything, um, I certainly see the benefit of having less of those. However, I would still caution to use those when appropriate as an alternative to a digital option that you have for those patients that are less technically savvy. And maybe they don't have the apps or the electronic device or the form or whatever it is that they're going to need to fill their stuff out electronically. Keeping a paper option is nice. And then you've just, got those those outliers like myself that just kind of would rather fill it out. But if you do paper, then please include postage or you're never going to get one back.
Right, right. Absolutely. Ellen, how about you? How about on the electronic side? What do you think?
I like an electronic email, but many email addresses are, when we send something out through MCL, we get a lot back. They bounce back because we don't have the right address. So, and I know that a generational, like Brianne said, many people do not like the electronic format, but there's a whole generation that prefers that. So it's definitely a balance. I like an electronic format because I can really think about what I'm going to say. I can delete it. Whereas if I write it, I scratch it out, it looks messy, and then I don't send it in because I'm a perfectionist. So it gives me the artistic freedom to sort of change what I'm going to say.
From my perspective, I agree. I think it's easy to delete that email. What we have just found in our own experience, we had some of our clients switch from a paper format to an electronic format. And the first several times they sent the electronic surveys out by email, they were horrible. Response was horrible. So they had gotten 50%, 60% response with the paper, and the email responses were 5% or less. So, and when you send out more requests, that might just be a factor of math to get a lower response rate, but a low response rate certainly isn't great either, right? So it's kind of a mixture there. Okay, did we forget any types? We already talked about the push buttons. Brianne, any extra thoughts on those
Ooh,
things?
this one just jumps to mind. I feel like it's kind of on its way out, fortunately, because this is the kind that I hate. But that's a personal preference. If it's effective and you're getting feedback, even better, is the phone survey. The actual calling people up at home during dinner time in the middle of, homework rush or whatever it is. Could you tell me about your experience? I know those are still prevalent in when you do call into a call center. Hey, would you hang on for a quick survey after we hang up? Like all of that kind of stuff is still out there. I've not had one of those personally in a long time, but the ones that I do, I usually hang up. But hey, again, if it is out there and it's effective for your organization, do it. I'm just not a big fan, but it having whatever format to get you your feedback and your information is what you need. So if by all means use it.
I've just noticed something recent with airline surveys. They ask about the airport. Was it clean? When were the seats? How was the food? How were the toilets? Whatever the questions were. And then if you want to record your response, click here and you can upload a video. It's like, oh my gosh,
Oh
I would
gosh.
never do that. Would you guys do that?
No, would never. No.
I don't think anybody wants to see me or hear me, but that's just me. So here
No.
we are on a podcast talking about this, right? Okay. Well, so another thing that we kind of that we are kind of aware of ourselves in our own business is that we are kind of cautioned about not sending too many surveys out to too many people because the comment is that there's survey fatigue. What are your thoughts on over surveying or just constantly being asked for feedback, either from the same company or different companies. Tell me how you feel about that.
Mm. I think it's real. It's out there. And any of us that regularly use any type of goods, services, experiences, anything where a survey is part of it, because they're constantly coming in. So I do think survey fatigue is real. Um, However, you go back to the mandatory standard that you mentioned, like it's not a personal preference. You have to do it. But the freedom within which how often to do it, I appreciate. And so that's kind of where I think maybe it doesn't need to be every single time. Maybe it doesn't need to be whatever the frequency is. But I do think there needs to be a periodic questioning, surveying of your customers, determined by you as much as possible, just through your normal operations. And then after you have gone through or implemented a significant change. So, maybe you have a go live with, oh my goodness, with an EMR, and after a certain given amount of time, then begin surveying on that particular aspect of that, or flip to a new courier service, or something like that. So I think that have your normal cadence of surveys, and then maybe whether it be specific to the change that you've implemented or incorporating it, and now you have a new set of questions that's now inside of your regular survey. But it's real. Getting surveys all the time and too much, I feel like, is definitely part of modern life now.
Agreed. Ellen, any other thoughts on surveys, or what about different types of customers? Would you have different frequency for different customers? So Brianne talked about the CAP question, whether it's an annual physician survey by every other year. What are your thoughts? Maybe other types of customers. Does that frequency shift based on who you want feedback from?
Well, I guess it depends on the topic and what you're going to do with it. If you're just going to survey for the sake of surveying, I don't think I'd waste people's time to do a survey unless you're going to do something about it. So, like Brianne had said, before and after, if you want to know the current state of a courier because maybe you're going out to RFP for a new courier vendor, I'd want to know from my customers, all of them who have a vendor that comes in and picks up specimens, what they like about the current courier, what they don't like about the current courier. Are they coming up early? Are they coming up later? And then I would use that as part of my RFP process to choose a new courier. And then I would probably survey them after I had my new courier to say, did we make an improvement? So I guess it depends on what you're looking for in the survey. If I notice that my volumes in my patient service center are going down, I might want to find out, and hopefully I know beforehand why patients aren't coming to my service center. But I would want to know maybe why. And, about surveys, I often would have my new phlebotomist sit in the waiting room and sort of pretend to be a patient, because you can also do informal surveys of your staff. Just have them pretend to be a patient. What do they see with their eyes, knowing what the best practice should be? And what are they hearing from patients as they're sitting in the waiting room? Oh my gosh, there's no books here. Oh my gosh, there's no things for kids to play with. And you can do real-time survey data just by sitting in the waiting room and listening. And I would often do that. So I just wanted to add that point.
And my only thought, to kind of tag on to that patient experience piece, I think to do a patient survey after every patient encounter is not inappropriate. So you may have some frequent flyers and they're coming in every 3 months for a blood draw. And I think that it would be okay to survey them every time. Of course, they always have the choice to throw it away if they don't want it. But the other piece is that you wouldn't want to say, okay, it's our annual patient survey for phlebotomy and you only do it once a year. So I think there can be some frequency differences based on who your customer is. And maybe, especially in the patient service center, if you're using the smiley faces, just rotate the questions once a month, and then you have some quantitative stuff. And as I watch our time, you know what, guys, we are at the end of our time already. So to bring our conversation about surveys to a close, let's do a rapid fire question. And I think that the listening audience might be thinking, okay, I got to know more about surveys. Tell me more. So what resources do we have that are available to the listening audience to help them with their own survey development?
Hey, I got something, Jane. So
Okay.
on the Mayo Clinic Labs.com website, we have a great little customer survey satisfaction instruction sheet. You can download it. It's a Survey Monkey, which is free, and you can go in there. It's I think you can just type in the search customer satisfaction Survey Monkey instructions, or you can find it under the education insights, outreach, and business solutions, and it's in there. So you can find it.
It's in the
Nice.
it's in the patient experience part of the
Yep.
tactics and tools. So can't miss it. It's a
If it's
PDF.
step by step, that's what I would
It's step by step.
It's kind of in there, but I think you can
have to
search it.
download.
So
And it's open to anybody. So you don't have to do any special login or anything like that. Brianne, I interrupted. Your turn.
No, you're good. I was like, oh, please tell me it's got pictures and stuff. And I'm like, yep, I've seen it. It has. The other, I just want to put in a quick little plug is this month I'll be doing the blog for the team and it will be on surveys. So we're going to do a little deeper dive, little different perspective, but there will be an accompanying blog article to this podcast about the same topic. And so just for some more information, different perspective, more ideas, stay tuned for that. It will be out as well.
So we hope this was inspiring for our audience today to understand that surveys are worth completing. We know not all of them are easy to do, but please know that everybody's feedback matters. And hopefully you got some tips and tricks to help you make your own survey process better. So Brianne, Ellen, you guys have done a great job today of sharing your perspectives. And maybe we all will just take some time and fill out that next survey that comes to us whenever we're asked. So thank you again for joining us today. And thank you to the audience for listening to Leveraging the Laboratory. This is a podcast from Mayo Clinic Laboratories. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to this podcast. And until next time, we encourage you to continue to promote your community-based laboratory. The needs of the patient come first.